All right, welcome. My name is Brian McGinty, and I am starting something called College Football Primer with the idea that you don't have enough time to watch every single game of college football. You have kids, you have a job, you have a wife, you have a girlfriend, you've got hobbies, and programs like College Game Day that run for 3 hours. It's hard to watch 3 hours of pregame and then 3 hours of a football game and then 3 hours of football game and not feel like you're just wasting a ton of time. So the goal of College Football Primer and what we're trying to do here is pick the best games, the most intriguing matchups, the best bets. We have categories. I'll explain them in a second. But the premise is too often, again, like Fox Sports and their big game Saturday or ESPN, they go to like the schools with the biggest name brand recognition. A lot of places they go, Ohio State, Michigan, Oklahoma, USC, right? Those are name brand schools. And that's why they go there, because they know people are interested. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're at the best game. The best game in my mind is the one that from the kickoff till the fourth quarter, with 2 minutes left to go, is going to be enthralling and entertaining. And that's not always the big dogs. That's not always where Fox and ESPN set up shop. So that's the primary goal. But there are other things that we want to talk about as well and highlight so that when you go into Saturday, you know exactly what the schedule is. You know when to put your kid down for a nap. You know when to walk the dog. You know when to go grocery shopping. So that you have your weekend set up and you don't have to go on to ESPN or your phone and be like, oh, what am I supposed to watch? Which is that? No. That's the goal. That's what we're trying to do. So the categories are best game. We just talked about that. What game is going to be the most enjoyable to watch? The next one is the most intriguing matchup. And this is usually something where like there's a storyline or like an undercurrent or something going on that kind of makes the game more interesting than maybe the score line suggests or the box score. I think a good example of that would be something like if South Carolina played Oklahoma this year. That would be an intriguing matchup because Spencer Rattler left that school. Same with USC, right? Caleb Williams, Lincoln Riley. That would make an interesting game. That's very intriguing. The next one, backyard brawl. That can be something where a crosstown rival is playing. USC, UCLA, Florida State. That's a cross-state rivalry. These happen all the time. Texas OU, border rivalry, right? We'll highlight those games. And multiple versions of those games are happening over the week, so I'm here to tell you like which one you should watch. Another one that we'll do is best bet. Okay, which of these games has the best line or over under? Okay. And in some of these categories we'll have multiple, but we really don't want to do more than like 4, right? Like again, that's 12 hours of college football. So we're really going to have very simple categories. We may change it up based on like the week. Like we'll have a Halloween theme, scariest matchup, right, type of thing. But that's the goal, is to talk about college football and prepare you in roughly an hour. Like again, college game day is too long. Okay? These pregame shows, even with the NFL, are too long. So that's the goal of this. And when we get started, let's just like pay homage to the fact that it's over. Summer is ending. The dead zone of sports is gone. Thank God. And we need to talk about how great college football is. Because in my mind, college football is the greatest sporting event to be broadcast in history. And it's like, why is that? Well, it's just The NFL, let's just go with football. And you can kind of extrapolate it to like any sport, but like I think number one, like football's in big markets. Like you can't have a professional team unless like you luck out like the Green Bay Packers. Right? I can't think of, I mean, unless you want to call like Jacksonville a small market. It's really hard to sustain a professional franchise in a city that's small, especially a football team where you're only playing 7 to 8 home games a year, right? For maybe a third of the year. Okay, so it's really hard to do. So they're in big metro areas. College football is not the same way, right? You've got Denton, Texas has a football team. Fort Worth has a football team. Auburn and Tuscaloosa have a football team, right? Ann Arbor, Michigan. That means that the fan bases are very much intertwined with the school. And that's the other thing is people attended these schools for 4 years and they pass it down to their kids, where their kids go. The alumni base always grows and you have these rivalries that again are more locally defined. Look again at the NFL where it's just like the Dallas Cowboys play the New York Giants. They're in like an entirely different part of the country. They play the Washington Commanders, right? Like, cool. You know? I guess Tampa Bay and New Orleans are close cities, but I know that Georgia and Florida, the universities of, are much closer, right? And their fan bases are much more intertwined. Okay, stadiums. The Big Ten has 3 football stadiums over 100,000 people. That's more than the continent of Europe. Like, think about that. The Big Ten. The Big Ten football conference gets more viewers in the United States than the English Premier League. And this sport goes from, I'm in the Central Time Zone, 11 in the morning till, I mean, we'll see if anything replaces Pac-12 after dark. I think the NBC is trying to get the Big Ten prime time. But even then, you'll get Pac-12 games, Pac-4, whatever we're going to call it, that start at like 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock on the East Coast. That's awesome. Like, that is so cool that you can go 12 hours and still be like, man, I got another football game to watch. The football teams, unlike the NFL, college football teams are an entirely different team after 4 years. And yet, like, a lot of them keep the same coaches. Like, if you're a coach in college football and you stay with a program like Nick Saban, Bob Stoops, right? Joe Paterno, and you win a title with your team, you get like a statue out front, you know? Like, it's really hard to do that in the NFL. Like, they just turn dudes over. So, like, the tradition, the rivalry, the kickoff times, like, the fan base, the tailgating, we haven't gotten into that, but, like, you get the point. Baseball does not have that. American soccer does not have that. Nothing else in this country or on the planet. I think the English Premier League is close because they've got towns with, like, small towns with teams. Like, it's close and you get relegated. Like, it's close. But it's nothing like this. Like, you don't have Saudi Arabia buying college football teams, you know? Like, another reason why it's so pure and beautiful. I know NIL's changed things, but I don't think it's changed that much. Like, you know, Ohio State always had money. Alabama always had money. They always had ways to be like, yo, you get like a Tempur-Pedic mattress. Like, that's not giving a player money, but, you know, like, they're getting a perk that Toledo can't do. And so that's why we're going to talk about college football every week. Before we talk about college football, we got to talk about what happened last year. And last year, you had Georgia cement themselves as the best college football team in the country, and they're going to be the best college football team for a long, long time. Like, I don't know anyone in their right mind who doesn't have them number one. So let's go into to rankings. Let's talk about my rankings, and then we're going to talk about conference realignment, and then we'll talk about this week because we got to catch up. All right. Georgia beat TCU 65-7. That's just insane. And that's after, we need to look at the fact that that was probably the greatest New Year's, the Final Four, the Peach Bowl and the Fiesta Bowl, Georgia versus Ohio State and TCU versus Michigan was probably the greatest back-to-back college football games in history. Like, scoreline, for those of you who forgot, Georgia 42, Ohio State 41. With Georgia kicking the field goal to win it as the clock struck midnight going into 2023. Like, epic comeback. TCU, Michigan, epic. Like, epic games. And to think that, I think it's strange that TCU beats Michigan 51-45. Georgia barely beats Ohio State. And then you have the idea that Michigan had beat Ohio State just a few weeks prior, right? So you would think the matchup with TCU and Georgia would be close, right? Michigan had beat Ohio State. TCU had beat Michigan. TCU is going to hang, right? They don't hang. So Georgia is rightfully number one. I've seen rankings where a lot of people have Alabama like 4 or 5. If we look at, let me pull up the top 25 here just a second. Yeah. AP, top 25, Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama. Why is Alabama 4 when they have Nick Saban? Like, how? I know they didn't make the college football playoffs, and I know what I'm about to say next is also going to be like, well, wait a minute, you apply a different standard to Alabama, but they have Nick Saban. Like, that dude's, what more do you need to know? Like, he's done everything you can do as a football coach to make a program that's like, all right, another man up. I know they lost Bryce Young, but they've got guys. They've got an offense. They've got Nick Saban. Like, it's not like they don't know what they're doing. It's not like the guys who are coming in there are going to be like, man, what's it like playing in the SEC? Okay? The issue, I think, that some people are seeing is in terms of returning starters, Alabama has 9. Georgia has 13. Like, that's insane. That is the Eagles alone basically drafted, I think, the entire Georgia defense. And Georgia's like, oh, yeah, we still have 7 guys coming back. So for top 25, like, you've got to have Bama in there because of Saban. AP's got Michigan number 2. Michigan has 13 returning starters, 6 on offense, 7 on defense. Ohio State's got 12. But I do think you've got to look at the fact that, like, I like the way Michigan's built. Like, I know Ohio State took Georgia to the wire. And I know TCU beat Michigan. But that O-line at Michigan is ready for Georgia, I think. And I think Michigan's got a coach. Or, like, Ryan Day's a great coach. But they've got an NFL coach. And it's taken them a while to figure things out at Michigan. But if there's anything we've learned is guys who can coach in the NFL can coach really, really, really well in college. So I think Michigan's got to be in there in top 5. I think the fact that LSU coming up at number 5 in the AP top 25. I think they are going to be, to be third in the SEC, you've got them returning 13 starters. And then for a lot of people, everyone thinks that A&M's going to have a big year. They're returning 15. I think it's done. I think that thing's sailed. I think Jimbo Fisher is not who we thought he was, and A&M needs to let him off the hook. So, with the AP Top 25, we've got Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama. I have no problem with that. I have no problem with LSU at number 5. I have no problem with Florida State at number 8. Florida State is returning 16 starters. Excuse me. They beat OU in the Cheez-It Bowl. I think their conference schedule is going to allow them to do really good things. When we talk about rounding out the top 10, we've got Clemson, and then we've got Washington. And here's what really, first of all, I don't know why anyone goes past number 10. Like, number 15. Going back. We shouldn't be ranking these teams, like, right now. Like, we don't know how they're going to perform. They've lost guys to the draft. You've lost guys to the transfer portal. You've gained guys. We have new head coaches. You have new schedules. Like when you play in the SEC, you don't play every team in the SEC. Your schedule is going to change every year. The Big 12 is getting 4 new teams this year, right? And it's just like, how are we going to come out here and say we know how these teams are going to perform relative to each other? The only thing we know is that Georgia's better than everybody else, like by far. And then that Alabama's got Nick Saban. But after that, I don't know like what you're supposed to do with after number 10. And I think the ranking system that we have does a serious disservice to teams outside the top 10. Because if you lose one game and you're a team that's ranked outside the top 10, like if TCU lost one of their first 4 or 5 games, they're not playing in the title game. Like, and that sucks. Like, and that's kind of ridiculous. Like, there's no reason we should be doing this right now in August. And in terms of things that get me hot and bothered, it's the fact that Texas always gets shoved into the top 25. And this year they're getting shoved into the top 10 because they were returning 15 starters. Okay, Texas didn't even make the conference title game. Think about that. And they're a top 10 team. It was 2 or 3 years ago they went 6-7 and they were ranked in the top 25. Like, I'm so tired of that noise. And that goes back to the point of like a lot of these writers don't watch a ton of college football. And the gap between 1 and 5 is tight, right? I don't think there's a huge difference between the rosters of Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama. Okay, I don't think there's a huge difference between those squads. Okay, but once you get to 7, Penn State, Florida State, like there's a gap. Like again, Florida State barely beat Oklahoma, a down Oklahoma team last year, and people have got them number 8. Clemson was not great last year. They're number 9. Like, why are we ranking them? Like, I don't get it. Conference title winners. Let's look at conference titles. Because again, like this is okay. Clemson, they did win 39-10 against North Carolina. Utah, 47-24 against USC. USC is ranked number 6 in the AP Top 25 poll. Like, what is going on? That doesn't make any sense to me at all. Georgia versus LSU, 50-30. Michigan beating Purdue. And Ohio State, I think, is an exception. Ohio State doesn't make the title game. Ohio State, Michigan was a play-in game. Fine. Okay? Kansas State. I don't see Kansas State ranked in any top 25. They won the Big 12. They beat TCU. I stand corrected. So they're 16. So top 10. TCU 17. Again, make that make sense to me. How Kansas State is ahead of TCU. I know they lost guys, but they also gained a crap ton of guys in the portal. A&M, with all the returning starters are 23, and then Tulane and Iowa are rounding out the bottom. All right, so for my top 10, because I'm not doing top 25, Georgia, Bama, Nick Saban. I'll bet money on Nick Saban. Ohio State, and I only rank Ohio State above Michigan because I got Michigan next. Dude, if you're at Ohio State, you got to be pissed. And Ryan Day, that fan base, I don't know if, I respect the fact that they're mad that he's lost to Michigan in 2 years. Because I'm kind of that's how this works. That's why it's called a rivalry. You're going to lose sometimes. But if that guy loses again to Michigan, he may lose his job. Which is insane. Absolutely insane. Ohio State fans, if you want to know what happens when you fire your coach for stupid reasons, look at Texas. When they fired Mac Brown. Yeah. They were going 8-4 and 7-5. And then what happened? You hire a guy like Charlie Strong, who, Lord knows where he's coaching now. You become irrelevant for almost a decade. So if you want to fire him for losing to Michigan, go for it. Okay, so Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, LSU, which I think Brian Kelly is a great coach. You look at what he did at Notre Dame, you look at what he did at Cincinnati, he doesn't have bad years. He has years where he doesn't meet expectations that are high, but he doesn't his floor is super high. And then you add in the athletes that Louisiana and LSU just pump out. And I think they're going to do really well this year. You got to run into Bama, but the one thing where I'm pushing back against people just on principle is Utah. I think Utah is going to be out for blood this year. And the way they just manhandled USC twice, I think they're just these dudes. First of all, they've got the Tongans, those big, bad Polynesian dudes, because there's Polynesian enclaves all around Utah. You've got some Mormons who are 25. And I know everyone's whoa, bro. Their quarterback is Cameron Rising. He's 24. He's on his 6th year. So this is not I'm whoa, bro, what do you think? They've got men. They have men. Again, when we opened and we were hey, you know what makes college football fun? Guys between the ages of 18 and 22. Because you don't know what they're going to do. By the time a dude hits 25, sorry, I'm about to sneeze. I think I'm avoiding it. Excuse me. By the time a dude hits 25 years old, car companies are finally giving him insurance. Or car companies are finally allowing him to rent a car. Right? He's now finally mature enough, and I say women, but I think the reason why they have it is I know it's 25 for everyone, is because dudes are morons. We're really dumb. But after we graduate, we get a job, we have to work full time, we get a little more frontal cortex development. We can start doing things like grown adults and not a bunch of chimpanzees running around. And Utah has like this mentality that is cutthroat and tough and gritty and grinding. And then they have grown men and Heisman candidates. Cameron Rising was a Heisman candidate last year. So I have Utah, I think Utah's going to do well. And part of this is, here's my shot, because I'm not going to be bitter about this at all, is Lincoln Riley is soft. And that defense is soft. There's a reason why he went to the Pac-4 now. There's a reason why they didn't consult Lincoln Riley when they were going to the Big 10 or Big 16, whatever they're calling it. And that was highlighted in the title game. When they were up at half. And they got demolished 47-24. I went to bed thinking, man, they're going to win the title game in Lincoln Riley's first year. And you wake up and it was like a miracle. And go watch those highlights. If you have not seen that game, because that game was on a Friday night, and I don't think a lot of people really cared about it. Go watch the highlights of that game, because you see a defense that's just tired, and they're like, oh, the offense is going to bail us out. As someone who watched Lincoln Riley coach, that's the MO, is we're just going to score more points, and we're just going to play prevent, and we're not going to hit too hard. It's just soft. The whole thing is soft. And again, this is why I don't like the fact that a lot of people have USC as 6 and Utah is 14. Think about that. Again, why are we doing this? Why? Why is that? Let's look at how many people they're bringing back. Pull this up right here. Utah is returning 14 starters, 8 on defense. USC is returning 14 starters, 8 on defense. AP top 25, USC 6, Utah 14. What is going on, dude? Why? That doesn't make any sense at all. And again, do you want to get conspiratorial and be like, USC's paying people? Make it make sense, because it doesn't make sense. I mean, I know the reason why it makes sense is because it's a brand name. USC is a brand name. Utah is not a brand name. USC has Lincoln Riley. USC has Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams is amazing, and we'll talk about them in a little bit. But I don't know why we do this to ourselves. Anyway, we're talking about my top 10. LSU, 6, Utah, because they should be there. They deserve to be there. They won their title game. They beat USC twice. I don't know why they're ranked so low. 7, Florida State. They're returning a lot of starters. They've got a quarterback. They've got a coach. I think they're going to do really well. 8 is USC. 9, Penn State. Penn State is returning 14 starters. I think Ohio State and Michigan are going to beat him, but I think they're going to do well. And finally, Clemson. I think Dabo Swinney had a down year for the first time in a long, long time. I really dude, what's going on? And that happens, to everyone. That happens to Nick Saban. As much as I want to be yo, bro, what's going on? I think Clemson is going to rebound this year. So top 10, Georgia, Bama, Ohio State, Michigan, LSU, Utah, Florida State, USC, Penn State, Clemson. All right. Now that I have put that out there, in 3 months, I will look like a complete moron. As will the Associated Press. As will, we don't know. That's the point. Go back and look, right? It's just like when they look at recruiting. We'll talk about that maybe when recruiting comes around. Okay, so before we get to, because this is catch up week, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not talking about the condiment. Before we get to our most intriguing matchup, our best game, and our best bet, we don't have a backyard brawl or one that I'll highlight, so we're going to save it for week 1. Again, this is episode 0, by the way, because it's going to be a mess, and I'm sorry. Conference realignment is awful. I always hated the line that people, when you'd ask people, do you like the NFL or do you like, again, I'm in Texas. Okay, so Texas is a little different. If you go to like New York and Pennsylvania, if you go to New York or Massachusetts, Maine, New England, maybe the Pacific Northwest, like I get why they would like the NFL more than college. Okay, but if you go to like Michigan, Iowa, Nebraska, again, when we talked at the outset about what makes college football so great, like in these flyover states, like this is all you have. No offense. Like no offense. But this it's like a big deal. Like it's prime time shit is going on in Lincoln, Nebraska. Or Iowa City, Iowa is having like Iowa City, Iowa will have USC at some point come to town. And on the one hand, that would be an argument for why Iowa City like may love this new realignment situation that's going on. But going back to where how I started this, when you would ask people like, do you like NFL or college football? They would say, well, in college they just play for like their school. They're not playing for money. They're not playing for a paycheck. And we know that's changed with NIL. But I always hated that line of reasoning because they're playing for a spot in the draft, and that is money. Like they're playing for a start, like they're playing for the same thing. Like you don't think there are perks that happened like under the table if you were good, if you're the starting quarterback for Auburn, like there wasn't some incentive to produce on Saturday. So I never really liked that line of reasoning. The reason why college football is better is because in Iowa City, this is the only thing going on. In Stillwater, Oklahoma, this is the only thing that's going on. And now, or Pullman, Washington, home of the Washington State Cougars. They're left out. Washington State is left out. They do not have a conference right. Well, they have a conference. It's the Pac-4. And it's kind of like, are they going to play Boise State? I mean, I guess that works. But Washington State was way more fun. USC, Washington State was way more fun. And on the flip side of this coin, it's just like, do you want to see USC Rutgers? Like, who wants to see that game? Like, why? You know what I'm saying? Like, but it's the same reason why USC is like ranked in everyone's top 10 for no reason. It's just a brand. And that's why people initially said they loved college football, because it wasn't about the money. But this realignment is all about money, and it's all about markets and eyeballs and NIL. And that sucks. Like Oklahoma State is about to have its last matchup for God knows when. Like that sucks. I like playing Kansas State. There's another town right there. What goes on in Manhattan, Kansas? Nothing goes on. Like, it's a train town. I love it. Like, I love it. Like, that's the thing. Columbia, Missouri, right? Like, I know they're in the SEC, right? And like the SEC is big time football. But that's because they're a well-run conference. But like these teams that are about to be left out or these matchups that are about to happen, those used to be also like a savory treat. Like it used to be a treat to see Penn State versus Washington because that didn't happen every year in the regular season. But now it's going to happen a lot more. And, you know, the Rose Bowl is the granddaddy of them all. And now what is it? You know, like, so on the one hand, like I talk to OU fans and like there is some enthusiasm in the fact that like I am going to be excited to play Ole Miss and go to Oxford and for them to come to Norman. Like I'm going to be excited to play Florida and Alabama. But I'm not going to be excited to play Vanderbilt. I guess I want to play Kentucky. You know? Like Auburn's fine, but like what have they done lately? You know? Like I would rather play Texas Tech at night. You know? Like that is there's a history there where you would look on the schedule and be like, bro, we're going to Lubbock. Again, what happens in Lubbock? What happens is like big programs lose. Again, going back to Texas, like Texas had to go to Stillwater. Like blue blood, everyone always puts Texas in the top 25 because they're Texas. But Texas had to go to Manhattan, Kansas, and Texas had to go to Waco, and Texas had to go to Lubbock, and Fort Worth, and Stillwater. And now they don't have to do that. And it just kind of sucks. Like this money thing. So, yeah, they'll get to play Texas A&M, but the Texas A&M Texas thing is just another example of like that was a Thanksgiving tradition around here forever. And then it was gone, and the only reason it's coming back is because Texas got jealous of all the money A&M was getting, so they're going to the SEC. I guess it's cool that we'll see TCU versus Arizona State. You know, I guess BYU Oklahoma State is going to be a rivalry. I guess UCF versus Baylor is a thing. You know? Like it really sucks that this is how it ended up, and that we'll eventually probably have like two tiers. 48, you know, you'll have the ACC, Big 12, Big 10, and SEC. I think the ACC is going to survive, I think. And then everybody else, right? So it stinks. The upsets won't be as big because just the brand name type stuff, you know. So it's really disappointing. It's going to be really interesting this year on the OU Texas Farewell Tour when they go to BYU in Cincinnati and they play UCF in Norman. It's going to be interesting to see how the refs call those games. But overall, why do I want to see Oregon playing Maryland in the Big Ten? I want to see Oregon playing Cal I want to see Oregon playing Oregon State. I want to see West Coast after dark. But they're probably going to put a lot of those West Coast teams that are now in the Big Ten like at 6 o'clock, you know? Again, that sucks. UCLA with Chip Kelly after dark at like 9 o'clock. Halftime at 10:30. That was awesome. And it may not happen again. Sucks. Anyway, that got me emotional. Speaking of emotional, Colin Cowherd's an idiot. Colin Cowherd said that Oklahoma is going to be the next Nebraska. And I don't understand why you think a school that borders Texas, that gets their recruits out of Texas and California, like they're a national recruiting college. Like they've got people, but California, Texas. He made some comparison about like the last time Oklahoma had a 5-star coming out of the state of Oklahoma, and it was like similar to Nebraska. Okay, let me name the 3 coaches over the past 23 years at Oklahoma: Bob Stoops, Lincoln Riley, Brent Venables. One went to and won. Bob Stoops won a title game. He went to 4 title games. Lincoln Riley went to multiple playoff games and lost. He should have won the one against Georgia in the Rose Bowl with Baker Mayfield and Mark Andrews. And that CeeDee Lamb, that stacked team, he won multiple Heismans, right? That guy, I mean, no one's going to say Lincoln Riley's a bad coach. He's just not a defensive coach. And then Venables, who's got multiple title rings. Like, you're saying they're the next Nebraska? Who does Nebraska recruit out of? Like, what's their state that they recruit from? Ohio? Michigan? No offense to those states. But, like, Michigan and Ohio State recruit outside of Ohio State or Ohio and Michigan, right? Like, they're national recruiting bases. Nebraska hasn't been a national or had a national recruiting base since the 90s. And that was because they had a system with, the option. And then that combined with the fawning and fanning over USC and Lincoln Riley, they're not going to win anything. So again, Colin Cowherd's an idiot. That may be its own segment. Like this week in how Colin Cowherd's an idiot and doesn't watch any college football. And because he finally started caring about USC football. Because a dude, like basically his age is now there. It's like, oh my God, we're going to have Lime. He's going to have the audacity to say that Oklahoma that's joining the SEC is going to become the next Nebraska. I think that's probably the other reason why he's saying it. Whatever. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. Like, I think it's safe to say Nebraska botched their coaching search, Scott Frost. I don't think they were ready to go to the Big Ten when they did, and they suffered for it. I mean, it's kind of in the same way that, like, Texas A&M, once Manziel was done, like, you kind of saw how ready they were for the SEC. But OU there's a reason why, like, we're waiting, and there's a reason why Texas is waiting, because we got to get ready. All right, it's time. I said an hour. We got 15 minutes to keep it under an hour. Let's talk about the upcoming week, week 0. This is probably the worst week 0 we have in front of us, like maybe ever. But again, this is like episode 0. We have Navy versus Notre Dame in Dublin, UTEP at Jacksonville State, UMass at New Mexico State, Ohio at San Diego State, Hawaii at Vanderbilt, and San Jose State at USC. Wrapped up, and this isn't in like chronological order or anything, I don't think. FIU at Louisiana Tech. So we're not going to go through all of our categories because we've only got 7 games this week, and they're all kind of duds. But episode 0, week 0. Here we go. Most intriguing matchup. I just shat over USC, like all over them. I think that's going to be an intriguing matchup in the sense of A, the spread is 30. So they need to beat 30. And like someone who has watched a lot of Lincoln Riley football, they'll probably cover. They'll probably cover. But they may not cover. Caleb Williams is the best quarterback Lincoln Riley has ever had, ever. And that's why it's intriguing. Like, I could see this game going one of 2 ways. So here's the storyline. Either USC is going to come out, run a few plays, put up 21 points early, and then just like bench Caleb Williams. Because Lincoln Riley's not going to want to open the playbook on week 0. He's not going to want to injure Caleb Williams. Like, you know that dude does not. That guy's like number 1 overall pick. Heisman candidate. So they may throw up 21 points, and at halftime, it's just like, all right, 28 points, right? Spread's 30. That defense is not going to be very good. And I think San Jose State is like going to move the ball. So I'm intrigued to see like how long they keep Caleb Williams in, how much they open the playbook, and how well San Jose State does, because this is going to be like their nationally televised game. Like, they're going to get eyeballs. They've got to like put up something. So there's going to be fight in San Jose State in a way that I don't think USC, I don't think they're going to have it. So, like, it's going to be really interesting to see if they cover. It's going to be really interesting to see how long they keep Caleb Williams in. It's going to be interesting to see if they cover. And if San Jose State makes this a game in the fourth quarter, right? Like, what do you do then? Like, if it's a 7-point game and you've benched Caleb Williams, bro, you know what I'm saying? So, like, I think that's going to be a really good game. I think it's going to be a very intriguing game. So, most intriguing game of week 0 is San Jose State at USC. I think that's going to be good. Best bet. This one's pretty good. I would put a lot of money down on Vandy. This is the only time you'll hear me say this. Vanderbilt to cover. Hawaii is playing at Vandy. Vandy is favored by 17.5. Last year, Vandy beat, I'm trying to find the score. Vandy beat Hawaii. It was the same game. It was like 65-10. It was a blowout. So, put money on Vandy to cover. Like some serious money. Because again, and then you've got they're going across the continent as an SEC team. Vandy is returning 13 starters. So that's the bet. Like, they're going to cover. Like, hard. It's going to be a hard, like, I shouldn't say hard cover. Legitimate cover. And then best game of the week. The University of Ohio versus San Diego State is the best game of the week. That is where you want to have your eyeballs. The spread for that game is 3. And the over-under is 49. So, like, that's going to be a good matchup. Again, 2 teams that usually don't get a lot of national coverage will get it. Both those teams had winning records last year. Ohio went 10-4. San Diego State went 7-6. So in terms of matchup, like everyone's gonna be like, "Oh, Navy Notre Dame." Bro, don't watch that game. Yes, it's gonna be in Dublin. Yes, it's Notre Dame and the Fighting Irish in Dublin. But that Navy's horrible. Like Navy was not good before, like the past 3 years, but Navy is. Let's see Navy's record last year. Navy was 4-8 last year. Navy was horrible. Notre Dame was pretty good. Notre Dame's gonna be good this year. Not great, but like good. So it's in Dublin, and they're gonna play up the whole thing. Don't watch that game. Okay, that game's gonna stink. That is going to be a waste of your time. So, with that in mind, I think for like a bonus game. For a bonus game, I kind of like UTEP at Jacksonville State. That should be very interesting. But that's all I really know about it. So, thank you for watching. It will be much better next week in terms of we have real games. We've got the big boys playing. It's going to be Labor Day weekend, and I will go through each of the categories and talk about what is the most intriguing matchup, what is the best game of the week, what is the best bet, and what is the best backyard brawl, and we'll talk about some of the games that happened today. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Insta. The last thing I'm going to try to do on episode 0 is on Patreon. I'm going to find some way, like, look, Boomer Sooner all the way. I will change my shirt for the school or like the group of people who represent a school that give the most money. The second most, so each week, and I doubt anyone's going to give me money, but each week, number one school, I will like go out and buy a shirt. So like the University of Indiana, some reason like that fan base is like, woo, love it. I'll go out and buy a University of Indiana shirt. I'll do a better job of showing it. Like I'm not going to hide behind the mic. And then we'll open with the second place school fight song. So I don't know if that's going to work, but we're going to try it out. But it's just around the corner. You've made it. And I will see you all next week.